All righty, everybody. Welcome to Talking Real Estate with Champions Real Estate Team here at Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Ambassador Real Estate Company. Appreciate you joining us here over the lunch hour. We jump on every Wednesday over the noon hour. Joining me today is Russ Williams with Williams Mortgage. He'll kind of give us a rundown of what's going on the mortgage side of it. But let's jump straight into it as we're kind of right here in the middle of September. So for the last week, we've had 444 new listings go active in the last week. We've had 378 new contracts written and 547 sold homes. So I guess kind of big picture point of it, what we're looking at is we're having a little fewer new contracts written. I think last week was right around that same number. Previous week was a little bit higher. So we're kind of coming into those fall months where we're getting the serious buyers that are out there. So we're not seeing, kind of the looky-loos out there as well. New listings is kind of hovering about the same. What we talked about last week is that, as we're coming into the kind of holiday season, I think a lot of people if they're going to get their house on the market before the holidays, needs to get it on in the next couple of weeks because closing is going to be that, 30 to 45 days, going to be hitting right around that Thanksgiving time. And there's always people going to be looking to buy and sell throughout the winter. And I was just talking to a client yesterday about this, is that in that perspective of it, when you put your house on the market, well, let's wait till spring because then, that's when the biggest buying season type is. Well, yes, but then you also have more competition from a seller perspective. And right now, the buyers that are out there are going to be your serious buyers that are ready, willing, and able, and they're ready to pull the trigger. And they're, and everyone's saying, well, you may get multiple offer situations. We've seen that kind of slow down a little bit, but you're still getting a very fair and very appreciative price for your home as you go through that process. So, it still is a great time to buy and sell, even as we go into the winter months and heading into the fall months here in the near term. Big picture item of it, we have just 1,712 listings. Last week, we had about 1,800. So we're down about 100 from last week. So we had 950 active homes in the Douglas and Sarpy County, kind of the Omaha metro area, 640 existing homes, 311 new construction, about a month's supply of inventory. And we're up about 10% on the average sold price from this time last year. So as we touch on, the market's still very strong. As Russ probably touched on, the interest rates are very, very favorable, to get the home buying process going. So if you are thinking about buying, why wait till spring if you can kind of get into something now? I've had a couple contracts this last couple weeks that, we've got it at listing price. We've got a home inspection, we've got the home warranty that have all been accepted by the seller, which, 3 months ago, you weren't seeing getting a house at listing price. You weren't necessarily seeing home inspections, even though I highly, highly recommend them. And certainly you're not getting a seller to pay for a home warranty. So those are some things now that you can kind of take advantage. We're more of a neutral market, a balanced market, but still a very, very strong market as those prices and appreciation in those homes, so we're not seeing the crazy amount. As a seller, you kind of have to think to yourself, yes, your neighbor sold the house 3 months ago for $10,000, $30,000, $40,000 more than the listing price. Well, you might be a little bit late to the party for those kind of crazy numbers. But when you're pricing your home, where are you going to price it at? That if someone wrote you a check today, would that be a favorable amount for you? So those are some things to take into account. We'll touch base with Russ Williams now on what's going on in the mortgage industry. So how's things going, Russ?
Mark, I agree with you completely. The market is still very strong for financing. We're seeing interest rates hold steady for yet another week. That's driven in large part by the Federal Reserve Bank pumping a lot of money into mortgage bonds to keep rates low. Now, the Fed meets every 6 weeks. In fact, yesterday and today they met, and we're expecting at 1 o'clock today for them to release their minutes, which people are going to be watching very closely because it's expected that sometime this fall that they may begin tapering the purchase of mortgage bonds, which could start to put some upward pressure on mortgage rates. And the reason why that's so important, Mark, is, and this is why I echo your sentiments, that now is a great time to buy a house. Not only are home prices rising, but there's a chance interest rates could rise as well as we start to see the Fed taper. And as we've talked about previously, every 1% rise in interest rates is roughly a 10% reduction in borrowing power. So it's very important to take advantage of today's low rates and the home prices where they're at today, as opposed to where they may be in the spring. We're still continuing to see very strong numbers as far as first-time home buyers, making up roughly 1/3 of all purchases out there. Cash sales are still hovering around 20 to 25%, depending upon the market. And we're seeing a lot of investors buying real estate as well. So in the event that you're a homeowner who is thinking about maybe moving now, putting your property in the market, I encourage you to be very familiar with, especially if you've taken advantage of forbearance over the last year, be very familiar with what your payoffs are going to be, because I've been noticing some of those payoffs are due in a lump sum once you come out of forbearance, which some of you came out of forbearance in early September of this year. So you're just starting to see those payments hit, and others are actually tacking it on into the loan. So it's important that you know how your lender is handling that, whether you have a lump sum payment due, and how they're showing that for purposes of calculating what a payoff would be if you happen to choose to sell your home.
Yeah, and I think that's very true. Whether you're thinking of selling your house in the next 6 months or even in the next couple of years, that amount that you put on forbearance for that 60 days, that year long, or however long you've been in the forbearance side, is still going to be there. They're not just going to wipe their hand. The lender is not going to wipe their hands clean of a year's worth of mortgage. So just make sure you verify, talk to your lender, or are they going to increase your payments? That's another option, is that your house payment may be $1,000, but you got, $12,000, let's say if it's $1,000 a month, they're going to add that, over the life of the loan, potentially raise your monthly payment a little bit on there. So it's just being verifying that. So that's something that I went through when I first got my real estate license in 2008, is we had the home buyer tax credit that basically was like an $8,000 credit that the government was giving you. Well, for the first year that they were doing that, you had to pay that back. If you sold the house, I think, was it within 3 or 5 years, that you had to pay that $8,000 back. So at that time, our appreciation wasn't there as much. And if someone had to sell their house in the 2 years that they had, if they paid $100,000 for it, they had to basically pay $108,000 back. So they may be upside down. And that's where some people got hurt by that, is they weren't aware of that situation. So, and then I think the subsequent year, it was forgiven. So you didn't have to pay. So it just literally depended on when you bought your house, if that was going to have to be paid back. So that's something similar that we're seeing, another 13 years down the road, where the government's trying to help everybody out, give a little bit of a grace period, but they're not going to forgive that, those loan payments throughout that. So making sure you verify exactly what you got, so you know what you're netting on the sale of your house. So, and we touched on that, I think a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, that are there going to be a lot of foreclosure homes coming on the market? I don't really see that happening as much, because we've had such a growth and appreciation in our house, in the home values, that your equity has built up, substantially, that you can still sell your house, and it'll pay off that, lump sum of $12,000. If you net 50, you're going to get $38,000 out of that. So that's just something that I don't see that people are going to give their house back to the bank and walk away from, that equity they've built up over the last handful of years. So I think that's where those homes may come back in the market, if the homeowners maybe have to change jobs or have to relocate or something to that sort. Then yes, those homes may come back on the market if their jobs have changed or their financial status has changed, but it's not going to go back to the bank, in my opinion. Just looking at the sheer numbers of it, why would you walk away from that? Whereas in 2008, people were upside down. They're, going to have to come to the table with 40 grand. Well, they can't do that. So they're going to short sale it. Basically going to have to get the bank to approve that. And that's why those short sales were coming, on the market, is because they're just like, heck with it. I'm just going to walk my way, wipe my hands clean of it and get out as with as little damage as possible. So, yeah, that's something that we have to be aware of, over this next handful of years, that, hey, in 2020, the pandemic, did you do forbearance for any length of time? Okay, let's touch base with the lender. Where do you sit? What's your status in that regard? So, yeah, other than that, I think that's kind of, do you have anything else that you got to touch on at all, Russ?
No, I think you covered it. We're seeing low foreclosure and delinquency rates coming out of forbearance. Hopefully that trend continues.
Yeah, obviously we want to keep people in their houses. In 2008, when we were having, if you watch the movie The Big Short, it's a very good, kind of big picture of what happened in the U.S. with the financial crisis. But as I said, the market is very strong right now. It's more of a balanced market. So give us a holler. If you were kind of a big push in the summer, didn't get a house, give us a holler. And there's a great opportunity right now to buy a house, even to sell a house, because you may be one of the only ones on the block for sale. So that may get some of that competition out there, and you're not going to have that competition from a seller's perspective. So, some people say, oh, I'm going to wait till the spring. Well, yeah, so is everyone else on the block. So it's kind of one of those things that you look at it from that perspective, going through there. So yeah, that's kind of all I got, unless you got anything else. But appreciate you listening to our Talking Real Estate segment here, Champions Real Estate Team at Berkshire Hathaway. I'm Mark Wehner II, along with Russ Williams. We appreciate you jumping on, and we will see you again next week.